Charles, people are very fond of this title today, but I've heard rumors that if we use foul language within the first moments of a YouTube stream, it will have a negative impact. How are you doing, Charles?
So I shouldn't say any of those words, any choice words. I won't.
We can say it later, but this is another good reason for people to sponsor the show. They're going to be able to join us after this segment for the First Amendment Forum on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com. So I guess now we could say it's about the horse shit whisperer, and it doesn't matter.
I didn't hear that. Yeah. So some good news. I went to a personal trainer for the first time in my life. Signed up for a course and put my bare feet on this machine, and up instantly pops out a
body mass index,
all these different things. And in the good, I'm not going to get into the actual statistics.
Did it say
but
wear socks?
I wear them when I play tennis, but I have lost more than 10% of my body weight, which is pretty good.
Yeah, no doubt. Everybody can see you look like certainly the fittest that you've been since I've known you, and congratulations on that. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I'm also the guy's very good. He was helpful in normally when you talk to people, and I did go to a gym and once regularly, actually 20 years ago. And you get there normally people who know about weights and weightlifting, and that, but don't also know a lot about nutrition. This guy was trained as a chef.
Oh, wow.
And dabbled in. He is a chef actually, and he's also a martial arts expert. And he got into this, in some circuitous way. But he gave me some excellent tips on my diet. So I think all of this is going to help me play tennis at a higher level, much higher level, and which is important. And I just feel great.
That's good to hear, Charles. Next, you'll conquer the world of snooker.
Snooker is a tough game, particularly if you grew up as I did playing pool, because the balls are smaller, the table is much bigger, the holes are smaller, and they're like this. So you can't see it, but an American pool table are like this. In snooker, they're like that. So you have to be very, very precise in your shooting. It's a good way to waste a lot of time.
Well,
which I don't want to do right now.
Someone is injecting nonsense into the chat, so I won't bother you with that, but it's got to do with Ted Turner and his bison ranching.
Yeah, well,
I think they closed the Ted Turner Grill in New York City, but that's not important, Charles. We need to talk about, Adam Schiff. He's being sort of skewered, and we've got all of these leaks. He's been accused of leaking classified information and all this sort of stuff.
Well, I think what we may be close to doing now, it's been part of a great, hopefully, reawakening. The American public that cares about news has been fed a line of proper bullshit since, I would argue, maybe before 1941. I mean, when you think back, in theory, people hold out FDR as the great savior who saved the U.S. from, allowed the U.S. to exit the Depression through his wisdom and insight with all these big social programs. I have read pretty good analysis that says exactly the opposite. That what he did is he prolonged the Depression, and he inflicted upon us a system that we're still trying to crawl out of. I mean, when we got involved in the Depression, government workers were paid less than private sector workers. So it made sense, perhaps, to do these big infrastructure problems using more lowly paid government workers. Now, government workers, when you consider how much their benefits cost us, and the waste and corruption, they cost us much more than the private sector worker. And the left is relentlessly hammering this theme that government could do no harm, give government more, in part on the fiction that FDR saved us from prolonging the Depression. And then you take it a step further and you say, now what if the whole system, from legacy media, legacy publishing, legacy academia? What if it's all corrupt? What if none of what they say is right?
I think that's more accurate. Charles, of course, you're aware of this Committee on Public Information that was created by Woodrow Wilson to control news and radio broadcasting in the build-up to World War I, right?
Right. And you could probably go further back. I mean, in up to 1700 in the UK, the king, wasn't the king himself, obviously, but the king in England controlled what books were published. Full stop.
Yeah.
You couldn't publish it. Now in the UK, if the government says to a newspaper outfit, you can't publish that story, you get what's called a D notice. You can't publish it. You can't discuss it. So query, how did the government find out that a story was about to be published? Oh, perhaps all stories that are in the UK media are first shown to the government for approval. Why would you why would you read a UK newspaper?
Now they've changed the D notice to the DSMA notice, a Defense and Security Media Advisory. Official requests to news editors not to publish or broadcast items on specified subjects for reasons of national security.
Yeah, and you have there's that idiot Ursula von der Leyen is promoting a similar pan-European thing where it's not only, you don't withhold stuff simply for national security, but for, I think it's general reasons, or it's been trotted out by Ursula as protection for journalists, but in the fine print, of course, you learn it's worse than the DSAM notice. This kind of thinking, muddy thinking out of Europe, is what brought them into the dark ages for, call it, 500 years, from let's say 1100 to 1600, or roughly, that period. This is dangerous thinking. In a society across Europe, the populations are shrinking. We're growing, they're not replacing, the national people are not being replaced as they should be, and the immigrants who don't hold the same values, indeed may hold values that call for the destruction of the resident population, they're surging across unvetted borders. Why would you allow that?
Charles, I think what you were talking about is aptly titled the European Media Freedom Act.
Right, exactly.
Taking away your Freedom Act.
Right. You don't have none of that.
I mean, this is how they do it, though, right? They name it something pleasant sounding like that, but as you said in the fine print, it's talking about how you don't have any freedom. Right.
And, meanwhile, you look at in the UK, I believe that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister's approval rating, is below 20%, I think now. It's way, way down. You shouldn't be ripping apart the fabric of your culture and civilization, pushing down platforms that nobody really supports, when your own government is down at whatever level they are now. I mean, it's ridiculous. He's governing like a tyrant. And as are these unelected...
This says negative 41%.
All right. Is that good?
What does that mean? How could it be negative 41%? They found other people who disliked him so much. Everybody in England hates him, plus 41%.
I think what that is the difference between the positive and the negative.
Yeah, it's a British way of expressing something that doesn't make any sense.
They're driving on the wrong side of the road yet again. But so I mean, we're in a situation where Schiff, with his stentorian voice and his various positions and the backing of the deep state, he gets to break all the rules, lie, cheat on his mortgage applications, engage in deviant behavior, yet being held out as a family man or whatever. And then he's allowed, indeed pushed, to leak classified information with others that was not only classified, it was wrong. And then use his crew, his co-conspirators, to whip up a frenzy. I mean, it was Schiff who was centrally involved pushing Eric Ciarmella on us as a whistleblower. He wasn't a whistleblower. He was not in the room. And he didn't follow procedures appropriately, and he was working hand in glove with Schiff. Why does Schiff get this kind of a pass? Why does Obama get this kind of a pass? It just is not fair. And beyond that, it's grossly illegal, if not
You've raised an
treasonous.
interesting point, Charles, because they keep just saying that he approved this classified leak, but I don't think anybody has told us what the classified information was. And really, the more interesting aspect seems to be that he told other people. He didn't do it. He, Charmella or whoever. It's always that he's telling somebody else. It's very social engineerish of him. And also, he doesn't want to get in trouble. He wants other people to get in trouble.
Right. And this idea, that David Ignatius, the Washington Post reporter, is at the center of almost every major leaking scandal. He's centrally involved in this one. And so every time, now when you see any byline by David Ignatius, you should put a comma, FBI after it, and FBI, because, he's not coming up with this work independently. And I think the FBI should not be in the business of manipulating the news cycle, right? It should be in the business of investigating where, I don't know what the standard is, where there are grounds to believe that federal crimes have been committed. And there are a lot of federal crimes.
Other aspect that you're bringing up now is that James Comey was leaking information through, what was that guy's name at the Washington Post? Richmond, right. And so, again, we see this whole...
Sorry, Richmond was a law professor at Columbia.
Right.
And Richmond is the son of a billionaire real estate developer. So there's a mutual friend that we're not going to name his name, knows this guy personally and went to his father's house. And it's like, the house is like the Taj Mahal. So this is a guy who may or may not have legitimately gotten on the law faculty at Columbia, but he nonetheless is now a tenured professor. And this is one of the people that Comey was leaking to. So he leaks to the law professor, then the law professor leaks to the media. So it's an indirect quote
like
leak.
A conduit. Yeah.
Right. But this is not the way that journalism should be happening. It just isn't.
It's not even journalism. It's treachery, because this is, one guy tells another guy who then leaks it, because obviously the FBI director can't go to the news and tell them, oh, here's what's happening, because this is the FBI giving us this information. But this guy says, hey, I'm some rich, fancy guy living in a Taj Mahal house, being a law professor or whatever he is at Columbia, and he's giving the newspaper information. It's like, ooh, Washington, D.C. insider or New York City insider. It's laundering information, isn't it? In the same way that we've discussed that Ben Wittes was trying to say, hey, it goes in both directions. Washington Post through Ben Wittes to the FBI through this law professor to the New York Times. It's a ridiculous cycle.
Right. And in the judicial process, people need to remember, as much as I believe the people who have committed and are committing ongoing charity fraud should rot in prison and lose all their assets, they are innocent technically until the justice system, such as it exists, proves them guilty to whatever standard is reasonable by a preponderance of evidence, I think in civil, and beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal. So, these organs of the FBI, these stooges for the FBI, who are letting information out that affects the way jurors are going to think about a defendant, that's outrageous behavior. If you're going to do that, you don't belong in government. Go be a short order cook somewhere. Go compete with robots.
There's another component, though, to what you're saying, the way that they're doing it, because it goes from Comey to this guy to someone else. It's essentially exactly what George and his brother and Chris Boozy did to me. It complicates holding them accountable by the law, because now they're saying, oh, well, technically what Chris Boozy said is true, because he's saying you were accused of this crime, even though I never did the crime and the initial accusation is defamatory. The court was able to absolve Boozy by saying technically it was true.
Right, and make a mockery of the law. I mean, this harkens back, it was a much lesser, it wasn't central to the whole assault on Trump. But when we met with Shelby Halliday at the Wall Street Journal, I found it very curious that and I met with her quite a few times. Every time I met with her, has the FBI talked to you yet? And I'm saying, like, how do you know that the FBI might be talking to me? You know, I mean, obviously she was talking to the FBI, and obviously the FBI sent her to speak to me. You know,
Pretty suspicious, don't you think?
It's very suspicious. You know, a young, attractive reporter, and that's their modus operandi. You know, you find young people who are, you know, just beginning their career, and you know they're trying to make a name for themselves at whatever media publication, and you say, listen, can we meet at Starbucks? You know what? I don't want to discuss this. You don't have to say I don't want to discuss this at FBI headquarters, but can we meet for a cup of coffee, Shelby? Sure. So she's meeting with some high-level FBI guy and shooting this shit and gets her instructions. Is a suspicion of mine. And I think that's the way it works with a lot of these people who you know, in legacy and now in new media, you know, who rise in prominence from, you know, a difficult past, let's say in Russia, not to pick on anybody we both are thinking about, and end up suddenly, you know, you're top of the news hour every cycle. Well, how does that happen? Do they overlook some element in your past and then, you know, say, so long as you play ball, we're going to make you a new superstar over here? Is that how they do it?
I think so.
I think it is. And then you think about, if there's a monopoly that needs to be broken up in this day and age, it's the publishing industry. The global publishing industry is too concentrated, and the ultimate owners of some of these top 5 publishing houses, or maybe it's now down to top 3, have provable ties to Nazis. Provable. You know, and this idea that you can get picked. You know, you're making, let's say you're making $80,000 in legacy media as a young, I don't know what the right number is, but let's just say 80. And somebody comes along and says, would you like an agent? I've seen a few of your articles. You're pretty good. Wow, I can get an agent. Sure. So you get signed up. Then the agent says, you know, if you did a book along these lines, we could probably get an advance for you, $1 million.
Ooh.
Well, you're making 80,000. $1 million sounds pretty good. And, you know, suddenly you're an award. You make sure you get an award for the book, a Pulitzer for the Russia hoax stories, for example. You get your Pulitzer, you get your Emmy, you get this and that. Next thing you know, you're on PSMNBC or
PMS NBC.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, or what do they call CNN now? The DNC or DNCNN? But
Communist News Network.
Yeah, it's a Chicken Little News. And the glide path is there. You know, suddenly you find yourself getting invited to fancy cocktail parties, and you meet billionaires' kids, and next thing you know, you're rich. You know, it's rotten to the core, and there should be, given the proliferation of, or given the ease with which you can now get a book-length treatment to the market without using a publisher. We need to really look at the global publishing industry and say, you know, why shouldn't it be broken up? You know, a lot of these, I saw an article in Zero Hedge yesterday, I think it was, about some famed MIT PhD candidate who had come up with some conclusion that MIT or Caltech or both Nobel Prize-winning economists thought was fantastic. His academic work was so convincing. And this guy was like, before his work was actually published, it was a pre-publication note, it was already being cited in the academia. And the next thing you know, at MIT, it was an article I got from the guy, I think Brunet, B-R-U-N-E-T, or Brunet, whatever his name is pronounced. Suddenly this PhD candidate has been removed from the MIT website. Why? Because his whole argument was made out of whole cloth. It was bullshit. But it was celebrated for, you know, a year or more. You know, that's the power that academia and the media complex have to pick winners and losers in thought. And it shouldn't be like that. There should be more rigorous debating. And people should be much more skeptical of what they read, particularly what they see coming out of legacy media and academia.
No doubt.
But getting
find
back
that too easily. Yeah.
It's an email, actually. It's not on Zero Hedge. Oh. But Anyway, getting back to Schiff and the fantastic work of the art department, um, that he has any credence left is beyond ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy who is a proven liar, right? Until he instigated the impeachment of Trump, in the history of our country, there had only been two other people impeached, right? And he did it, all that work that he did using our money, using taxpayer money, brainwashing, willingly brainwashed on the left, and those with Trump derangement syndrome, brainwashing all of them. The furor he created, the amount of money he wasted is probably in the trillions of dollars. The Biden presidency, right?
Charles, I must differ with you slightly on the brainwashing. It's more like skull interior dry cleaning, because brainwashing would require a brain.
Yes. Brain cavity insertion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just fumigating the interior.
Right. But and I loved as because I'm a son of a scientist, a nuclear physicist, and my mother was, an expert in Bach. So two pretty smart people, and following, being raised by them, being taught to think critically. I can't relate to people who will just swallow hook, line, and sinker the garbage that comes out of the mouth of the anchors of CBS, NBC, and ABC, if they watch that shit, or if they read even the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. Why would you read these partisan magazines that refuse? I gave Maggie Haberman in 2 or 3 sessions chapter and verse on the Clinton Foundation scandal in 16, chapter and verse. And her response was, well, this is not really in my wheelhouse. I'm not really that comfortable. What do you mean? She gets a Pulitzer for selling actual horseshit on the Russia hoax in 2018, right? And this is somebody that was, I think, and remains one of the top reporters, at the New York Times. It's preposterous. When I go through Dubai in the lounge there, they have all these newspapers, including the New York Times, for free. I don't look at any of them. I go get some more hummus. I don't have a cat. If I had a cat, I'd rip the paper apart and use it as cat litter. But so there needs to be a reckoning for Schiff and for Swalwell and for many others who conspired and are conspiring, and Schumer and Pelosi and all these people who are terrified that Trump will actually get the team together to rip the scab off the wounds that have been inflicted on this country by means of this crooked propaganda, false narrative selling. And then we get to where I like to go is how much money have these people stolen or allowed to be, given to crooked contractors? How much?
Well, right, through law firms and all that kind of stuff. Charles, we've only got a couple of minutes left here. It's interesting, when you were just mentioning your father a second ago, I was looking him up. Did he have a patent for something to do with conference calls?
Yes, he did.
That's amazing, because you hate conference calls, and here it is. He's patented the facilitation of a conference call. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he also had something to do with uploading and downloading.
There's a whole list of patents for your father.
Oh, I know.
I think this drawing of the guy on the phone.
Yeah, the way it worked is I have the books here. He every day, he had a thought. He'd write something on his Bell Labs notebook and sign it, and he, some would become patents and others would not be explored. But yeah, he spent his whole to his dying day. He was doing this kind of stuff.
There you go, patenting the conference call. I like it. Well, listen, we're just about out of time right here, Charles, but we will be back. People should stay with us for the First Amendment Forum. People who are following me on X and subscribe at JG_CSTT. The sponsor exclusive segment will be uploaded as soon as it's done, because even though Charles's father could patent a conference call probably in, 2009? That's interesting. It must have been way before that he had it originally. But anyway, X can't get a live stream going. People who want to see the live stream can sponsor on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks to the 3 people who have been using the cryptocurrency to sponsor on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. We'll be right back. We had a lot to talk about with Adam Schiff and James Comey, and I want to talk a little bit more about how this whole Nwitty's thing hasn't been explored yet. He's connected to Adam Schiff and all these guys, so stay with us, everybody.